All right, looks like we are ready to get started. All right, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Lin Sun. I'm a director of open source at Solo. I've been a very long time contributor, one of the founding member of the Istio community, currently serve on the Istio technical oversight committee. And Louis.
Hi, I'm Louis Ryan. I'm the CTO at Solo. I've been with Istio project since the dawn of time, possibly even a little bit longer than that. And so just really excited to be here and talking today about what's going on and what's been going on in the project.
Awesome. A quick highlight of 2022, which many of you probably already know. Istio is sales to CNCF as an incubating project. We introduced Istio Ambient in September last year. There was a lot of excitement around Ambient, introduced the new sidecar list data plane mode without any disruption to your application. We've done a bunch of future promotions, so Sidecar, we will continue to support Sidecar. We've done external auth, gateway API, and workload group, and some of the other promotion to either stable or beta. We've also enhanced the security posture of Istio as we prepare for Istio becoming a graduation project for CNCF. We published the security audit results. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. We've also added additional platform support. So ARM is one of the biggest things. How many of you are using the new ARM laptop? Awesome. And how many of you tried the Istio support with ARM on your new laptop? Nice. Very cool. We also added dual stack. How many of you are looking at IPv6 of Istio? All right, a few of you. Very cool. This is a service mesh survey just to show you like the continued momentum around service mesh. The sources from CNCF, as you can see, more and more users are looking at adopting service mesh, and the top challenges within service mesh is really around the shortage of expertise and experience to adopt a service mesh, and also some of the technical complexity and architecture complexity, which we're hoping Ambient would really help solving in that space.
Okay, so what are we going to be working on this year? And what have we already been working on this year? So if you looked in the previous survey, right, you saw one of the top requirements was, how do I get the value of MTLS, right, the security features of a service mesh into production as quickly as possible? One of the big value adds of Ambient, right, and what John and just Christian went through a little bit, is that it's a much easier model for you to deploy a solution, like the Z tunnels, into your network that will turn on MTLS, and so you can get through that process much faster, right? Our goal with Ambient is to be able to get you from 0 to MTLS for a whole cluster, right, in a very small number of administrative steps, right? And so that's really trying to accelerate the time to value, like tie what we're doing to what people are saying they need out of a service mesh. Right, and so this is a huge part of 2023. Christian also talked about TCO, right? The operations for a service mesh, like how much work, how much complexity is involved in a service mesh, and what do operators have to do to maintain it, install it, make sure application developers are aware of its presence, are able to leverage it. And so what we're trying to do is create, instead of a giant pile of features that if you inject a sidecar into your application, you can use them, but if you don't, you can't. There's a much more graduated experience where the features of a service mesh are just there in the network if you need them. That's why it's called Ambient, right? They're just there. And if you write a policy that says, I want authorization policy, then authorization policy is enforced. If you don't write it, you don't get that. At no point in that process did the person writing the policy ever think about infrastructure, right? Our job is to take care of infrastructure for you, not make you think about it. And this extends from application owners and service owners to the people installing and maintaining Kubernetes clusters in the service mesh itself, right? And trying to just lower that operational profile. Obviously, last year was a big year for Istio, right, with the contribution to the CNCF. And we're going through the process now. We're trying to get graduated. We have our ticket open with the TOC at the CNCF. We have, as far as I can tell, met all of their requirements. But it's really been gratifying to see the effect that that donation to the CNCF has had on the community. Right? We get more engagement. You see more vendors, more solution providers now providing Istio solutions than before. So the community keeps growing. I saw an announcement this morning from Azure. I think they're now offering support of my Microsoft and Istio deployment as part of their marketplace for AKS, which is a pretty big step for the community, and it's really gratifying to see the effect that being in the CNCF has on the project. And then lastly, right, we had this theme the last 2 roadmap years, which is try to be boring and predictable, right? We are critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure should not be that exciting to operate, right? It should do what you expect it to do, and the operational steps to keep it in that state shouldn't be too crazy. And that's been a huge focus of the project the last 3 or 4 years, and that will continue to be a major focus of the project. Right? Even though we have a lot of exciting features, a lot of really powerful new things coming, we still want to be enterprise grade, right? To use that kind of boring old phrase, because it matters, right? You're not putting this into production because you like doing it as a hobby. You're actually trying to meet some important goals for your enterprise. So, we have our focus areas, right? There's going to be a lot of talk about ambient. Right, and I've kind of banged on a little bit about it, but we want to get that to production readiness. Right. There's a lot of work going in. There's a lot of people in the community involved. There's very active community meetings. The pace of development is very high. But we have to do that carefully, right? We have to be boring and predictable, and so if it's not ready, we won't tell you it's ready. If it is ready, we will. But we'll keep you informed about what's going on. There's a lot of innovation going on in the API space. Right, we've been working with the Kubernetes community, particularly on the gateway APIs. There's an effort being led within the Kubernetes community called Gamma, which is the gateway API for mesh, using kind of Kubernetes as a standards body to define APIs for mesh use cases that you could expect multi-vendor support for or multi-platform support for. And standardization is almost always beneficial to you, the end user, as long as the standards are good, right? And so our involvement in this effort is to try and make sure there are good standards, right? There's no point shipping a standard that doesn't do what you want. We're going to keep on with our stability and feature promotions, right? That boring theme. We want to be boring. And then, there's an ecosystem of stuff out there, right? There's always new standards, new other major open source technologies that are important to you and your use cases. And so we're constantly looking out to see what is the right mix of technologies and initiatives and projects that we should be engaging and interacting with to make sure that we are giving you all the support that you need to be a successful enterprise and user of what is a large ecosystem of stuff here, right? Like you see the CNCF landscape, right? We can't integrate with all of it, it's too much. But there are things within it that are very material to the things that we do in Istio and in Service Mesh. So we want to make sure that we're working with those things.
Tentatively speaking, really tentatively, we are looking at driving Istio ambient mesh to production this year. So Istio 1.18, which is going to be released next month. Actually, we have alpha builds already available for you to try, which ambient will be part of the release and will be alpha in that release. You might be thinking alpha might be a little bit too early for you to try, but because this is very new, we really want you to be a partner. We really want your feedback to help us shape the future of ambient. So please try it. Istio 1.19 is where we're looking at graduate ambient to beta, and with Istio 1.20, which we plan to release towards the end of the year, where we want to drive ambient to production ready. So check out the Get Started ambient mesh guide. There's actually a ton of work for us to drive ambient to production ready. I'm just listing a few here. Some of the ones we're currently working on within the community is looking at multi-cluster support, right? When we initially launched ambient, we've been focused on single cluster, but we know a lot of you are not happy just with one single cluster. You always need a high availability, multiple cluster. So we're looking at that along with virtual machine. We do believe a lot lot of our workloads still resides on VM. Performance improvements, we're looking at some of the performance improvements, continue running ambient with sidecar as far as throughput, latency numbers, continue improve Z-tunnel and waypoint performance. Multiple Kubernetes platform support. I heard somebody was saying this morning, ambient is only for GKE. That's completely not true, and I don't work for Google, so we're definitely looking at support ambient for OpenShift, support ambient for AWS and Azure Kubernetes platform. And also, we're looking at some of the CNI network compatibility with ambient, such as Calico and Cilium. So those are going to be important for us this year.
Okay. One thing, a quick thing, because I talked a little bit about TCO and Lin talked about the Z-tunnel performance. So one thing that we're finding by having this finely tuned Z-tunnel and tailoring it very specifically to this role is we're starting to see in our testing significant resource footprint improvements, right, for ambient versus the traditional sidecar model. I'm not going to quote hard numbers, but I'm just going to say that they are large and very encouraging. And you should expect to see things coming out of the community about that in the not too distant future. But I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder too much on that one. But it's pretty exciting. Oops, sorry. So I talked a bit about the Gateway API earlier. The Gateway API is this initiative within Kubernetes to provide a better and more reasoned API experience for configuring typical gateway use cases like middle boxes, ingress, etc., to really meet the needs of enterprise. You know, Kubernetes ingress has a lot of limitations that people have papered over with a sea of annotations. And so this is the Kubernetes standard for kind of traffic management, like layer 7 traffic management. And you know, we've been very active working with the Kubernetes community, folks like Bowie and Keith, who's here, and also Rob Scott, in trying to define that API, push that forward. And so we already have implementations of those APIs in Istio, right, for those use cases. And we will track the Gateway API evolution. If it goes beta, we go beta pretty quickly after that, right? So we've actually been one of the leading deliverers of support for that standard for Kubernetes. And in addition, there's an additional work stream within Gateway we call Gamma, the Gateway API for Mesh. There's a long definition of it up here, which is on the Gamma site. But if you don't want to read through all of that, right, it is about creating an industry standard with using the Kubernetes ecosystem as kind of like the standards body for defining traffic management, right? Specifically layer 7 traffic management. And so that's what we're working on. It's a collaborative effort across the industry. Other mesh vendors and other mesh solutions are participating in this, and so we're driving that one along. And so if you know standards are important to you in your deployment, then you know you can expect first-class support for that from Istio. In addition to the Istio APIs, right? So we'll make sure that you have coverage for whatever APIs you want to use.
Well, ambient is the future of Istio. We know many of you are using Sidecar, so Sidecar will continue to be supported for a very, very long time. So as a community, we are also focusing on stability of our Sidecar architecture. So in fact, Keith, I don't know if he's here, Carsten, you guys are driving. Thank you guys for driving Istio safe mode in the community. So with that, it's going to produce a safe mode that's not going to break you going forward. Telemetry API is one of the features we're looking at promote to beta and stable. The Intel team, Aris, I don't think you are here, it's been driving IPv6 dual stack, which is really useful, and they're going to continue driving future promotion for that, along with the eBPF-based traffic redirection for ambient, which is super important for ambient to support other CNIs. Carsten, I think you are here. You mentioned gRPC control plane with Gateway API is super important. So thank you for driving that also in the community, along with our existing WASM plugin resources. A couple of community members also expressed interest for that.
Yeah, so the Just touching a little bit on the gRPC part a little bit. gRPC itself, right, for super high performance applications, right, maybe you don't want any kind of proxy in the data plane at all, you want to do everything end to end. Istio will actually act as a control plane for gRPC directly, right, so you can use it to distribute policy and controls down into the gRPC runtime and have those applications communicate directly with each other over MTLS. Right? These are for, people who are very, very focused on performance and are willing to re-architect their applications to meet those needs. But there are definitely people out there with those requirements, and we want to make sure that we are able to meet their demand. Finally, obviously, there's like I talked a little bit earlier about the kind of integration landscape, right? There's obviously a large community of stuff. Many of you, whether that's the CI/CD side, right? Whether you're using Argo or Backplane or Helm or Terraform or all these other systems. There's also all the data plane integrations that we do. There's a lot of work gone in recently into OpenTelemetry, and OpenTelemetry has a lot of traction within the kind of broader cloud native ecosystem for telemetry and logs and tracing and other integrations. So you see that both upstream and downstream. We've done a lot of work with that. Spire and the CA integrations, right, and identity provider integrations, attestation systems working in kind of complex deployment environments where there are different identity providers. That's critical, right, because if I asked you how many of you were using more than one IDP, right, in your enterprise, I think probably all of you would put your hand up, whether it's the cloud or something on-premise. Obviously, we have Kiali, and Kiali's been a partner for the Istio project for a very long time, and will continue to evolve along with Ambient in particular. We continue to integrate with Prometheus and keep up with features there, with Jaeger, WASM, and there's a long, long list of things that we would provide integrations with. So we will be keeping up with pace for what we see as demand in the community for working with these other systems. Alrighty, well that's.
I think that's our last slide. So we want to take a minute to thank you all. I don't think we have much time for questions, do we?
We do have a couple of minutes for questions.
Okay, so
Excellent.
excellent.